Dr. Moss with us down in California, so he'll be presenting today over Zoom. So Dr. Fred Moss arrived on Earth on March 1st, 1958, and from that very second has been earmarked to be a healer. The family he was born into was in chaos, and in many ways was counting on his arrival to bring health and wellness back into balance. Little Freddie had his hands full, and over the next 6 decades, he has made it his business to bring healing to the world around him, not only to his family and friends, but to the community and world at large. What a journey it has been. So Dr. Moss has had a host of life experiences, including, among other things, being a 2-time college dropout and a Northwestern University Medical School graduate in 1988. Over the last 4 decades, Dr. Fred has been firmly entrenched in the mental health system, first as a child care worker and then as an internationally well-known psychiatrist. In addition, Dr. Fred has had leadership roles in multiple modalities, including inpatient and outpatient, homeless shelters, nursing homes, orphanages, halfway houses, drug rehabilitation centers, home visits, prisons and jails, and telepsychiatry, not telepathy, right? That's different. In many regions of the USA. Sorry, bad joke. Dr. Fred has been committed to the notion that communication, connection, creativity, and conversation are at the heart of all healing of all conditions of all types. Without this, people simply do not heal. With it, miracles regularly occur. Voices heal, listening heals. We humans are best when we are connected to others, and Dr. Fred's life mission has now become to assure that all people know that who they are and what they do matters, and that their voice, no matter where they're from or where they're going, can be heard. As the founder of the Welcome to Humanity movement and the True Voice podcasting mastermind and methodology, Dr. Fred now finds himself making the difference he came here to make. His years in the community, where he has been a physician to over 40,000 patients, and his storied and adventurous life traveling around the world has now left him uniquely qualified to remind us all of what we already know. Communication is where love arises from, and speaking truth and listening authentically are the source of that love. Dr. Fred is married to his dream partner, Alexandra, and lives in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas in Northern California. He is the proud father of 2 beautiful children in Texas and is owned collectively by his 3 cats, Valentino, Despacito, and Winston. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Fred Moss.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great. I love that that introduction ends with my 3 cats, because we are owned by them. And if you have cats, you know what I mean. So it's an honor to be with you at the Rotary Club today. I've been doing these talks at Rotary Club over the last several months. This year is dedicated to doing my talks at the Rotary Club. Service over self has become part of who I am. And I just found the alignment to be so strong that I now am joining the Rotary Club here in Nevada City, California. The talk that we have today is it's really interface between mental health, mental illness, and mental wellness, which I like to call mental wealth. They're hot topics in the workplace these days and hot topics in the community, maybe more so than ever before. So what are some of the costs that are out there in the world of mental illness in your community? Now, when you think about that, I'm sure your head swells instantly. They're very large. And what are some of the barriers that are getting in the way of getting proper care and attention to those people who are certain that they're having mental health or mental illness problems? Those also are very large, and they're playing a role in how we proceed together in this world every day. A more important and perhaps grim question is, what is the future if we're unable to do anything differently about our mental health and mental wellness problem? Pretty grim indeed. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. What if we could bring mental wealth quickly and efficiently to those people who are interested or who are needing of it, so that they no longer would have to wait in line at the clinic or use insurance companies or acquire a diagnosis or start any medications, which may or may not work. Sometimes they make things worse. What if they didn't have to leave or stop doing work or leave their homes? And what if they could stop making damaging, destructive decisions for others and for themselves? That would be a big breakthrough. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We can do something about that, and we can do it right now. That's what this conversation is. The greatest threat in the world today, well, it's not what you think. The greatest threat in the world today is not a virus. It's not climate change. It's not racism. It's not sex trafficking. It's not even war. Now, under no conditions am I minimizing the level of monumental calamities that all these things are, direct threats to humanity and the planet for sure. But the greatest threat in the world is something even different. The greatest threat in the world, as I see it, is that we are collectively losing or giving up our capacity to speak our true voice. We are either having it taken away from us, or we're becoming cynical or becoming skeptical that we can be heard in the first place. Because without this, we aren't going to have a chance in making any difference in those other things I just listed, which are monumental problems to address. And there's smaller problems that also require us to speak our true voice. And if we don't speak, well, we'll never be heard. But if we don't speak, we certainly can be hearded. And without a true voice, we will never be known. Not at all or ever. But with a true voice, you can have an instant access to healing and respect and peace. And in fact, as I see it, true voice is what's required to end all wars. Henry David Thoreau said this: "The mass of men live lives of quiet desperation and go to their graves with their song still in them." Today, we're going to learn how to sing that song of yours and bring a new level of peace and harmony to your world and the world around you. Hello, my name is Dr. Fred, and I'm affectionately known as the Undoctor. What is that name? Well, I've been a doctor for over 30 years, and I've been in mental health for over 40 years. These days, what I do is I undiagnose, unmedicate, and then undoctrinate my patients, meaning they no longer have to come to psychiatry anymore to address their mental health discomforts. In the last 30 years, I've seen over 40,000 patients, and I've practiced in nearly every area of psychiatry available in the United States and even abroad. Oftentimes, as a physician, I'm a major leader and sometimes the leader of an organization. I'm very familiar with the countless modalities that are offered and used to address mental disease, and I believe that I have identified an important secret sauce to mental wellness that is often overlooked or forgotten and is available to all of us starting right now. I'm going to share that with you. Now, the truth is, I'm not just a doctor, as my introduction already pointed to. I'm also a two-time college dropout, and in some ways very proud of it because it made me who I was. Let me explain. 64 years ago, I was born to that family in sheer disarray and chaos, as I'm told, and they were hoping for little Freddie to come out and bring joy, happiness, and communication and connection to my family. Well, when I did come out and I realized that that was my job, I began to do it diligently and did a great job for a few years. And to my two brothers, 10 and 14 years my senior, likely became very irritated with me, but that's a talk for a different day. I still was a bundle of joy. I was fun and easy, and I loved to communicate. My brothers led me on a path towards being rather precocious, and by the time I entered kindergarten, I knew how to read pretty well, I knew how to write, and I knew how to do simple math and multiplication. Now, so you can imagine when I arrived in kindergarten and none of my friends knew how to do any of that. They were all just interested in throwing blocks and picking their nose. And I wanted to read Henry Huggins. But the truth is, I was also throwing blocks and picking my nose. I don't want to separate myself from that. I just wanted to read and learn and communicate. I could tell early on that wasn't going to happen in kindergarten. And I could see that maybe the big kids, the fourth graders, fifth graders, and sixth graders would someday teach me how to communicate. So I was very eager to move through school fast and get to that fourth, fifth, and sixth grades where I could become a master of communication. Well, you can hear that by the time I got to fifth and sixth grade, it was already disappointing. Communication wasn't what I was learning then. It was maybe even worse at that level than it was in the earlier years. So I was hoping that I would learn how to communicate in junior high, but again, disappointment arose. Then I thought high school must be where this goes. So again, when I got to high school, I think that open discourse was even more discouraged. By this time, I was communicating when I wasn't in school as best I could, but in school, I was told to be just sit down and follow directions. Then I was hoping that I would go to a school. I loved their helmets and they were only 40 miles away. And I grew up in Detroit. So I went to the University of Michigan. At the University of Michigan, I was sure that I would learn how to communicate, but instantly saw that that wasn't going to happen there either. Not in the classrooms. I was in engineering school. And in that school, we were asked to just simply follow the professor saying and doing things I had never seen anyone say or do before, and then go home and memorize it and regurgitate it exactly as they want me to, exactly as they said it. And if I did it that way, they would call me a great student and then move me forward in the classroom. Now, the truth is that's the last thing from open discourse. And I tolerated it for about a year and a half and finally just said, no more. And I did what any responsible person did back in the day. And that was I boarded a Greyhound bus and I went all the way to Berkeley, California, so I could find myself. And I did find myself that summer. I had a great time in Berkeley, but I didn't have any money and I didn't have a job. So when I called home, my family told me that I should come home and try again and get a degree and then go back out and find myself. Well, I agreed to do that and sauntered back to Michigan and started again in Ann Arbor, this time in computer science, because they told me that was going to be a quick route to a job. Now, at the time, there was only one computer in all of Michigan. That's right, one computer in all of Michigan. That computer was a 2-acre facility in Ann Arbor. And what we had to do is use these punch cards and create stacks 700, 800 deep, and then bring the stack up to the front and have them like run a program 2 or 3 hours later to see if it ran. And then we'd see our name up there and which card failed. And then we'd have to do that. And the place was open 24/7. And it was a terrible situation. It was completely unfun and unworthy. And I couldn't see making a life out of that. So I did what anyone would do in that time. And I dropped out again. This time I went home and I told my parents that I was never going to go back to school again, ever, for no reason. So they got me an application at the State Mental Health Facility for Children. And I began working with adolescent boys. Now, what I was asked to do was really just hold the fort down. And I began communicating with these kids, these human beings, who, like me, didn't actually know what they were up to, didn't know what was going to happen next. And they were quite beautiful. And in that communication, I learned that connection and creativity, conversation, again, was at the center of all healing. And there I was healing them while they were healing me. I loved the job. In fact, I could tell you now that I'm simply a glorified childcare worker, even as I stand here 42 years later. But in the meantime, the part that I hated was the way psychiatry was treating these kids. You see, if Timmy was up too late or Johnny and Jimmy got into a fight, we would call the psychiatrist and let him know that Jimmy was agitated. And he would come down from his call room, interview Jimmy for a brief 3 or 4 seconds, and then interview us for 7 seconds, and then go into the nursing station with one of these, which I like to call a weapon, a pen, a doctor's weapon, indeed. And they would write something in the chart, and then we would have to go retrieve Timmy, bring him into the quiet room, hold him down against spitting and kicking and biting and swearing. And then we'd pull his little sweatpants down to his hip and jam him full of very powerful injectable sedative medication. We would wait until he stopped writhing, and then we'd leave the quiet room. And if he didn't say anything for the next 12 or 24 hours, we would call that a success story. By the way, don't you think that this is in the past? This is still going on in state hospitals and regular hospitals around the country to this very day. Well, that part of it I found to be entirely barbaric and unacceptable. So much so that I knew already that communication was what mental health was. And I decided to make it my business to go back to school and bring communication to psychiatry. You see, my brother, 14 years older than me, was already a psychiatrist, so I knew it could be done. And voila, 13 more full-time years in college. And I graduated Northwestern University Medical School, and then a residency in Cincinnati and a fellowship also in child and adolescent psychiatry. all the while studying child and adolescent. Unfortunately, during that time, there was an extraordinary paradigmatic shifting agent that took place. In 1987, a drug that we all know was introduced to the public. That drug, if you may, is called Prozac. And Prozac altered the way all of psychiatry was ever dealt with. You see, Prozac was a medication that we were planning to put into the water system in New York and LA. What it was a drug that declared that if there was something uncomfortable in your life, it was your problem. It declared that it was biological. All times that we were unhappy, it was our issue, something wrong with us. And it declared that there was a way to fix chemical imbalances by taking drugs. And our world has really shifted in that direction over the next 40 years. Well, guess what? I went into the school so that I would learn how to not give drugs. And before too long, I was typecast as a psychopharmacologist. So not only was I now the only kind of doctor, right? What's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? I was actually writing over 100,000 psychiatric medications over the next 30 years. Each one that I wrote made my heart wrench. I knew that it wasn't the best way to treat whatever discomfort that people had. And I tried to inject communication, but I really was generally unsuccessful. And I was living a terribly duplicitous life, not consistent with my true voice. In 2006, I like to call it my true voice moment. There was a significant shift in my career. I began doing something that today is considered entirely radical. I began taking people off of medication. I know. We're all so afraid to come off medicine. It's funny that we're so afraid to come off medicine and not afraid to come on medicine, but that's also a different story. Because when I began taking people off medicine and removing their diagnosis and letting them know that maybe there was nothing inherently wrong in the first place, that they were just experiencing life and its many discomforts just as it was, well, they got reliably better. And before too long, many of my patients said goodbye to psychiatry forever and re-optimized their life without a new diagnosis. Again, as my true voice moment, I realized something. I no longer had to be the doctor I had been up to that point. I now could be a healer, aligned with who I was and what I knew was right to make a difference. So at this point, I would like to ask you this question. Where are you still being a doctor in your life rather than the healer you see yourself and know yourself to be? Where are you still doing those things that you know you should are being counted on rather than the things that you really want to do and know are best for yourself and the community? This is an important question to take on, because once you realize that, you might give yourself some heat. And I'm asking you to really take a moment and accept it. Accept yourself, forgive yourself, and have compassion over yourself, because we learned very early on that being different from ourselves actually pays massive dividends. I know that if I scream a little bit louder, I get a bigger lollipop. I know that if I blame my sister for troubles that I caused, she gets in trouble and I don't. And I did do that. And we began to live duplicitously early on in our life, often before we even went to kindergarten. The crack in the cement has grown deeper and deeper since that time, and we've never gone back to repair it. Well, that's the bad news. But as you can imagine, there's also amazingly good news, because you can make a difference right here, right now, in that area of your life, starting today. And you don't even have to move to Tibet or live under a Bodhi tree or go to a cave or go in a long waiting list for the upcoming psychiatric clinic. So I'm going to go over a couple principles that I think are really important. Number one, pretending to be someone that you're not in order to protect the person that you are is not only totally ineffective, it's flat out ludicrous. We sometimes do that because we're afraid to show who we really are because we could get hurt. Well, I'm asking you, or even stating, that you're going to get hurt anyways, even if you pretend to be somebody else. There's going to be a canceller out there. There's going to be a hater out there. There's going to be someone who disagrees or misunderstands you. And although they won't really be hearing the real you, it's no protection against those things to pretend to be someone you're not. So if it's going to happen anyways, I do invite you to bring your real self forward, the one you've been hiding. Now, the truth is, you don't have access to a lot of things in the world going on around you, but you do have access to what you say and what you do and who you be. The truth is, again, you do not have to live in the imprisonment of the habits that have brought you to be here today. You can break those habits starting this moment and actually say something new, do something different, or be someone that you've never been before, more aligned and more authentic than you've ever been. I invite you to give that a try as well in areas of your life where you feel safe doing so. The secret ingredient in all this, well, it's a little counterintuitive. The secret ingredient to get this done is called listening. And what do I mean by that? You listen to the person or the people that you're with, and even more so, listen to the circumstances that you're walking through, the context, and then deliver creatively your true voice, which might come in the form of vocal or might come in the form of creative arts, art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening. You listen for that context with an intentional notion. Just screaming your truth from a mountaintop isn't the same as true voice. Just calling up your sister-in-law to tell her how much you've hated her over the years isn't really your true voice. Your true voice is meant to move the needle forward, to actually contribute to an intentional outcome. Sometimes silence, in fact, is a great access to a true voice. I promise you, if you begin making these differences, you will become the influencer actually that you already are. You see, you don't need 1 million followers and you don't need $1 million to be an influencer. Just like you are when you start bringing your true voice, your influence on the people or person around you will change the world for the better. When you speak, the world heals. I can also promise you that at that time, you will receive the applause that your word, your authentic self deserves. Maybe not out loud in the form of clapping, but maybe in the hearts and minds and souls of those who you are with. Your intimate life is also deeply affected by this. You see, you'll get the applause in the boardroom, and you'll get the applause in the Rotarian rooms, and you'll get the applause in the community, but you may also get the applause in the living room, in the dining room, and in your bedroom. That's right. The partner that you're with and the partnership you're with them is greatly affected negatively by the things that you're holding back in your truth. This can't be done alone, folks. This voice that's going on in your head right now, like whether I'm worth listening to or whether you're going to do this or whether there's anything more you can do, that's not really a conversation. Conversations do require at least two people, you and another person. So this is not simple. We are afraid and we sometimes feel justified in our fears. I invite you to take incremental shifts with the people in your world, your family, your children, your friends. Just start saying things a little bit more authentic than you've said before and experience the resonance, experience the power and freedom that comes from speaking your truth even more than you had been. As it turns out, true voice is the major prerequisite for what's needed for ending all wars inside and out. Give it a try. Let's call it the Great Reset. Speak your truth. Listen from your heart. Speak your truth again and listen even more. Applause and respect are waiting for you. Welcome to your new life. Welcome to love and listening. Welcome to peace, really, honest to goodness peace, inside and out. Welcome to humanity, your humanity. Welcome to your true voice. Voltaire said this: I may disagree with what you are saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Now, if you want to take a deeper dive into what I've spoken to today, I invite you to receive a free copy of a real book that I'll send you in the mail called, I know it's my last book and I know the title will blow you away. It's called Find Your True Voice by Dr. Fred Moss. And if you write findyourtruevoicebook.com and sign up there, I will send you a copy of that book. Afterwards, I'll call you and we'll see whether there's any reason that we can talk further to learn more about how you can bring that important true voice into the world. At this point, the greatest threat is that you will go through your entire life and never been heard. I'm here to stop that. I'm here to remind you that your voice matters, that who you are and what you do matters. There are so many places in the world where this is a real crisis. I have been hosting a summit called the We the People Summit. The We the People Summit.online is where you register for this free summit. I have assembled some of the most amazing, influential, inspiring influencers in the world, and I speak to them about how they got to be influencers. Almost to a person, each of them say that they became aligned with their own authentic self, and once they started speaking it, followers emerged. Now, some people also say that you can be an influencer if you just affect one person with your true voice, and that's my world. The True Voice methodology and community is based on a like-minded group of individuals who are collectively interested in speaking their true voice just a little more every day and using authentic listening as a primary tool to get that done. So please register at the We the People Summit.online because 100% of the proceeds and we're planning on raising $1 million, goes to the refugees, children, and women who are greatly affected by the war in Eastern Europe. My wife is 100% Ukrainian, so I have a greater stake in the game in that area. Finally, I also invite you to join us at the True Voice community. You can find us at true-voice.circle.so or the True Voice community on Facebook. And if you just want to speak with me alone, that would be great as well. My email is drfred@welcometohumanity.net. We have provided for you an evaluation form as well as a copy to these links that you can use. And I'd be glad to speak with any of you or anyone else you know who might benefit from this talk. I love giving this talk. I'm finally authentic to who I am, different than who I've been. And it's a deep pleasure to have been with you this afternoon. Thank you much for that opportunity, and I'm now open for any questions should we have enough time.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Moss. Do we have any questions here in the room? How about Zoom? Any questions for Dr. Fred Moss? We have one question, Garrett.
Yeah, so I have a question for people who are currently on medication for maybe, could be Prozac, could be some type of anxiety or depression medication. Is there anything else in your methodology where you, how do you help them transition off of those medications, to be able to hopefully not be on them at some point?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hear you loud and clear. It's not simple and it's not for everyone. So one of the things that I want to say is for those people out there who are really happy with their diagnosis and happy with the medications that they're taking, this is not the, go by all means, continue doing what's working. But for people who want to come off medicine and their family and their friends are all aligned with that, there is a methodology. And that methodology, I often use something called the Creative 8, which is another book that I wrote. And you can find that at welcometohumanity.net/creative or /creative 8. There's a PDF form waiting for you and a audio form that I dictated in. That's a book that speaks towards creativity and self-expression being the access to a lot of the relief of symptoms that are available that we now call mental illness. So when we are using art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, and gardening, we really have a new access to self-expression. And so much of our mental illness is really the fact that each of us want to be heard and we're not feeling like we can be for whatever reason. Either we're afraid or we can't express ourselves. Now, it's not true for everyone. It's not a cookie cutter. And I invite you to give me a call. I'd love to talk more if there's anyone in your family or your inner circle about what we might be able to do to address specific needs. It's not for everyone, but for the people who are ready, it's an extraordinary, a super extraordinary intervention that is very reliably effective.
Great. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Fred Moss.
And thank you, Kimberly, for sharing those the contact info as well as the online website URL.